is that this planet is our extended body. This is who we are. We are this planet. And so and I always correlate, I take it a little bit further and I'm like, well, hold on, if the planet can't be sustained, and we're comparing this to the suicide rates and the mental health crisis all over the world, everyone is concerned in this crisis. It's a universal problem and everyone has an individual relationship to it, but it's a universal problem. It's the same thing. We're decaying. The planet is decaying. Our minds are decaying. We are kind of in this folly and there is no way out.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Invictus Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is an actress and a supermom. She's a human explorer and a humanitarian. Somebody that I really believe has magical Elvis-like dust in the world, and somebody that I crossed paths with a few months ago that I absolutely had to have on the podcast. She's a consciousness advocate and the co-founder of the Never Alone campaign, which she co-founded with the famous Deepak Chopra, none other than Gabriella Wright. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Wow. Hearing the quote unquote, the introduction, I'm like, wow, okay. Yeah, is that who I am? Okay.
I think the most important part, obviously, that's just the tip of the iceberg of an incredible resume that you've pieced together over the years. But for me, we're all humans first. And when I met you for the first time at the Society for Brain Mapping and Therapeutics event, you just had such a uniqueness about you. And it was a deep thought process. It was that you had roots. And as we subtly discussed a moment ago, like Banksy behind us, yes. You have so many layers, behind the curtain. And so thank you so much for connecting today. And hopefully our audience and community gets to see the magic that I got to explore a little bit.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm just happy. I'm just joyful. I'm just happy to be with you. And I love sharing as much as one can, in life. And I think that is I almost want to start this conversation because we're laughing and we're smiling. But my mantra for this year is joy is the measure of success. And joy is the only measure of my success. And success doesn't mean the material gains that we think success is today. Success is, how do I feel? What is the relationship to me, myself, and I? What is my relationship with the world? What is my relationship with my family like? And what is my relationship to the mystery, of life itself? And like that little boy behind you, I totally feel like, okay, so let's go and find out some more.
Absolutely. It's all an adventure and one big exploration. I love that concept, though, that joy is the measure of success. How did you kind of come to terms with that being this year's mantra? Because I know joy is something that you speak quite often about that word. It seems to have a lot of meaning for you.
It does. It has a deep rooted meaning. But to get to why I chose this, so because now I work alongside the incredible Dr. Deepak Chopra, I'm very lucky, and I understand how lucky I am. So every teaching that he is delivering, not only as himself, but also within the Never Alone campaign, where we're looking at how do we free ourselves from suffering on the path to joy? How can we get from suffering to joy and at the same time unravel who we are and understand that suffering exists, but understand that also there is a path out of it and there is a path to joy. That ultimately is there. And joy is not happiness. Joy is a state of being. And that distinction was very clear to me. And so talking with him on multiple occasions, he said this once. He said, joy is the measure of success. I was like, wow. Oh, That is going to be my mantra for this year. that is
Mm-hmm.
lit because that's what we need. We need to rewrite success. And then I added, joy is the only measure of my success, to make it a personal,
Mm-hmm.
mantra for my year, the energy in which I want to carry this year in. And thank God I did, to be honest, because as you know, like the violence against women and girls in Iran, the residue, of course, of this ongoing pandemic, the Ukraine-Russian war. I mean, it's just a constant flow of distress. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I don't anchor in joy, meaning I acknowledge the world, but I also have to acknowledge myself on this journey to be able to be in the world, then that is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to measure my success of being in the world by anchoring joy. And that's why I chose it.
So much intention behind your words. I love that. And I can't help but lean into this concept that I feel like in our world right now, so many people are loving things and using people. But I feel like we should love people and use things. And
Yes.
for whatever reason, that came to mind for me as you were discussing this feeling of joy, because joy isn't something that you can necessarily see. It's felt within the heart and the soul, and then as a byproduct, you see it on human emotion, right? Through smile, through laughter, through a certain posture, and the frequency at which one operates. What are your thoughts around that concept? Because I feel like that's something that you and Deepak and the Chopra Foundation and the Never Alone campaign are working towards, is really humanizing everybody versus making life so transactional, which we see a lot of in the world currently.
Absolutely. Well, to begin that, we are without going too woo woo,
Mm-hmm.
because I like anchoring this conversation, but we are spiritual beings having a human existence. So within that, we have to understand that the material is our extended body. It's not an object. Okay, it's an extension of who we are. So I'm going to give an example to go back into where we want to go with this conversation. But we're talking about a lot about climate change, right? Climate change, the planet's sustainability, its own. And then we also have suicide, right? Most common cause of death between young adults is suicide, right? And then we also have within that category a lot of climate activists who are killing themselves because they don't see hope. They don't have the vision of a future. They don't see it. And all they see is the consumption of objects. We're
Mm-hmm.
over consuming, we're identifying with objects, with this and that. So what we're saying is that this planet is our extended body. This is who we are. We are this planet. And so and I always correlate, I take it a little bit further and I'm like, well, hold on. If the planet can't be sustained, and we're comparing this to the suicide rates and the mental health crisis all over the world, everyone is concerned in this crisis. It's a universal problem, and everyone has an individual relationship to it, but it's a universal problem. It's the same thing. We're decaying. The planet is decaying. Our minds are decaying. We are kind of in this folly, and there is no way out, which is why people are experiencing this huge mental distress and this kind of like, what is going on here? There's so much confusion. There's so much conflict. The planet is inflamed. There's a war. There's wars, so everything is related. And I think where we're coming at the Chopra Foundation is that let's remember who you are. Who are you? Are you the universe? Are you the co-creator? Are you the creator of your reality? And we take you back to who you are on the journey from freedom from suffering, the path to joy. Because when you realize that you are humanity in yourself, then you automatically start realizing that not only you're never alone, but you're also connected to each and every one on the planet, and you matter. Because when you matter, you realize that if you're not there, then it affects someone else, and it affects the other person, and it affects the other person, and it affects everyone. So the material consumption is a way to burn ourselves out of existence. I'm kind of like bringing this back. Like Deepak says a wonderful thing. He says, and I love it because it makes everyone laugh every time he says it, which is obviously joyful, but it's the truth. We're more concerned with our selfies than our self-worth. It's like we're obsessed with our selfies. What is this culture of objectifying? We're consuming each other rather than being with each other.
Yeah, for sure. I heard something the other day that was so interesting around giving control to the external to control the internal is the highest form of slavery. And I was like,
yes,
whoa.
Right on.
Yeah,
I agree.
I was like, that's really powerful. And that's kind of what I'm hearing there is it starts with self. It starts
Absolutely.
with a little bit of self-exploration, the integration of various forms of meditation, and then the shift in perspective to realize that, your role in the world has a domino effect and a connection to other humans along the way. And then as a byproduct, you've used a really amazing term that I love and I'm going to steal for right now. And that's that we're a collective. Yes. Anything found by itself is typically connected to something else. And I try to simplify it a little bit, but you speak so eloquently and so beautifully. And so I hope our audience can kind of piece that together, that it's so artistic and such an upgraded language delivery that I'm so appreciative to listen to it over here.
Oh, you're so sweet. But you know what that is? It's the other. I'm also an actor, Bryce. And being an actor, back in the day, when film didn't exist, obviously I'm not that old, by the way. I'm talking from like the root of what acting was. Actors were actually there to deliver messages for the social responsibility for the audience. Mm-hmm. So they were messengers, and messengers need to use their voice. But that didn't mean they didn't know who they are. They were very anchored in their being. Mm-hmm. And when you're so anchored in your being and you know who you are, you're able to channel or quote unquote become other characters, and you're able to take responsibility. Being on stage is a responsibility. It is. It's fun, it's beautiful, but it is also a responsibility. And responsibility doesn't mean it has to be, oh God, I'm saving the world and, I'm like, da, da, da. No, it means that you're just on a path of inspiration. You have vision and you're taking everyone with you because you don't want anyone to be alone. And that's also the role of how do you deliver a story to compel and to incite empathy so that people can be moved into their own being and they can take action in your life. So this is why I love, I love sharing. I love being, and I love using words that incite imagery,
And you're amazing at it. When I first met you immediately showed true authenticity, true vulnerability, and your storytelling kind of depicting your past, your childhood into the navigation of traumas, into how you've dealt with those traumas and used them to motivate, inspire, and upgrade your operating system along the way rather than allowing them to hinder you or serve as a leash or a weight vest. It's incredible, and that's where I'd like to explore next. This episode is brought to you by Mush. My friends over at Mush created an incredibly cool product of ready-to-eat overnight oats. And for those of you that listen to the podcast often, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And Mush has done just that, as their products have no more than 7 clean ingredients that are dairy-free, gluten-free, with no added sugar. Mush started right here at Invictus, as they had a vision to create convenient, healthy, and clean nutrition. And this landed them on Shark Tank, where the famous Mark Cuban invested in them. Now they're found in retailers all over the country, including Costco, Sprouts, Target, and Whole Foods. Check out my friends over at www.eatmush.com. Trident Coffee is sponsoring this episode of the Invictus Mindset Podcast. My guys over at Trident taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good and bad, and everything in between. At Trident, they're storytellers. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They help create connections through symbology and storytelling that engage their customers on an emotional level, and this distinguishes them from other coffee brands. You can find Trident in Imperial Beach and in Coronado. They offer over 14 plus nitro cold brews along with dairy-free options. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from their keto bakery. All of these options will allow you to support your health and fitness journey with Trident Coffee. They're more than just a coffee company. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Once again, that's tridentcoffee.com. Use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Take your coffee experience to the next level. Two important factors for us over at Invictus Mindset are true care and attention to detail. My friends over at RX Smart Gear have been bringing innovative fitness tools to the market since 2009. From their award-winning Evo speed ropes to their amazing gymnastics grips to their line of inflatable fitness equipment, they're constantly looking to problem solve within the fitness industry. They're always allowing us to have our gear work for us rather than against us. Hop on over to RX Smart Gear and use discount code Invictus Mindset to shop their latest cutting edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you. What was your childhood like in the UK? Because it sounds like you had this magical childhood with your sisters and your parents being involved as well, and some of the seeds that were planted early on that the world is very thankful to see them sprout now.
Yeah, I mean, look, I even have tears in my eye when you ask me that question, because I have to admit, I am so lucky that I can say that I had a beautiful childhood. It was just magical. My father, obviously still alive, being an artist, and big scale paintings, sculptures. We're living in and out of this studio, the gallery, like video art. There was always 4 or 5 cameras on in the studio, and I had no idea that these were on. So we were constantly we were immersed in his art, and it was just magical because we were allowed to do what we wanted. We never had no. Not because, of course, we were, naughty, 3 sisters running around. We always, I was always the eldest going, Mommy, Paulette's doing something wrong. So it was always I was trying to shepherd the 3 daughters, imagine, and we're perfect symmetry, 3.5 years difference between each other. So
wow, that's
7
cool.
years older than my youngest, and my other sister, 3.5 years. So it's perfect, we were the trio. And every night my father would share incredible stories that he would invent. And the stories involved the 3 of us, the 3 girls, and we would basically be merged with these 3 marbles. And we would jump through a mirror and, go and save different people in London and escape dragons flying over. I mean, it was Harry Potter before Harry Potter. It was literally, that was how our father brought us up. And we were never allowed to watch TV, which was actually a good thing, because I don't think, I love what I do now, but I don't think TV is something that is good for, I would say, imagination. You have to foster imagination with a blank canvas. And I was lucky because my father was giving me these lovely ingredients. And of course, my mother, when we were younger, she was still at university, so we spent way more time with my father, and we had the best time. And she's a marine biologist, so obviously she would make us watch. The only thing we were allowed to watch was Sir David Attenborough, the Blue Planet, Planet Earth. So I love his voice because he's just like, he's the voice of reason in my life. And by the way, a role model, believe it or not, still to this day, 40 years later. So point being is that I was just very lucky. Everything was magical. I learned all of the wind instruments before the age of 12. I was, constantly engaged in art as a language. And my little sister was singing everywhere. Pascal was drawing and like picking up guitars. And we were all kind of in this collective, and it was supported by our parents. So I am just lucky because I know that I hear many stories because of the work that we do, that a lot of children have not had that kind of childhood, but I had it, and I'm so grateful. And that's why I think that's given me an anchor that I haven't lost sight of, despite my life, I would say, tribulations and the events that almost changed. I mean, they did change my life, but I never lost my anchor.
I love the concept of fostering imagination with a blank canvas, because,
Yes.
Nutrition is more than what we eat. It's what we see, what we hear. And, I think I've heard you say before that there were some common themes that your parents shared with you. One of which that I think your father said to you was, don't be the common denominator.
Yes.
To really encourage, uniqueness and authenticity. Will you touch on that a little bit?
Yes. By the way, I still use it. I still use that quote a lot. I'm like, yeah, well, why are we trying to be a common denominator? I'm like, I don't want to be a common denominator.
I'm sure when you were young too, he said it so often that you're like, oh, I'm tired of hearing this. And then as you get older, it's like you hold on to those little sayings so much because they have so much value.
I know. Well, basically what it means is that let's always become the exception to the rule, meaning don't believe something until you try it. Go for it. Don't think you're limited before you go and do it. You're not an equation. You're infinity. And by the way, they never found a thing for infinity. They just did a loop, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, great.
Let's just turn 8 on its side. Let's let 8 rest a little bit.
Exactly. Let's just put that, exactly. Let's just put that aside. So let's strive for the infinity in us, which doesn't have an equation. If everything is measured that, science can be wonderful. My mom's a scientist. We have tons of scientists on our mom's family. It's wonderful, but remember, the leaky margins are the things that creates uniqueness, and those leaky margins can create, Nobel Peace Prize winners, incredible innovators in science and technology, and then leaders like Mahatma Gandhi. Like, that's what it is. Don't be a common denominator. Don't be a sheep. Just don't. I mean, why would you want to do that? I mean, I love sheep. I think they're really cute. But generally, because of the world that we live in, they're industrialized. They don't have the right grass. And you're like fed off to a machine. Do you want to be that? Do you want your person, your mind, your body, and to just be considered a number? I personally, no. So my father drilled that into me, and obviously I took it to a whole other level. I was like, okay, I'm running with this.
I love it though, because it combines the ideation to question. And I think sometimes within the world of science, it's like, well, don't question science. But science in reality it's a point in time. It's what we know up until that point. And unless you continue to question and challenge and push the boundaries, there is no movement. There's stagnation. And in my humble opinion, that's a form of hell, is just staying in the same place without growth and evolution.
I agree. I agree so much. And you know what? I often say to my girlfriends, And I tell them, when they're like going on about some guy that this, or, some story, right? There's always a story that is cyclical. And I'm like, I get it. I get what you feel. I understand. But you know what? You're stuck in a moment. And you're making that moment eternity, and it's hell for everyone around you. So please understand that there is a way out. But you can change that because you created your own equation.
I love that. It gives me the analogy of like a fishbowl. So many people are going round and round the fishbowl, and you're like, no, let's actually poke a hole in that fishbowl and let's escape to a larger pool of water where there's more perspective, more ideas, more adventure, and more
Yeah,
trouble. With that being
exactly.
said, where did your journey go next after this unique childhood with your two other sisters, and navigating not being the common denominator? Where did you go next in your journey? Because you had quite a bit of travel.
Yes. So my father, being who he is, decided because of international politics and the foreign policy that England had at that time, he wasn't in agreement with, and he said, "Well, why don't we go to France? Because obviously France." For those who live in Europe and who know the older generation of my father, it's always their dream to have a house in France. It's like, it's that kind of like poetic mirage and landscape. Oh, I'm in my house in France. So
Hmm.
my father had that dream, and he said, you know what, let's all live there. Let it not just be a summer place. And he found this beautiful domain in the north eastern region of France, in the Champagne region, and he basically bought it without really much consulting my mother. And next thing we know, we're moving to France, and all of the big sculptures are getting like transported across the channel. And
Wow.
it's like, wow, this is crazy. Because my father has this giant egg, like literally all made of fiberglass, and
Whoa.
and now that's sitting in the domain, and it's huge. And so my father, that's he likes space. So this space was spacious, literally, a barn and a coach house and studio space. And so he was very happy. And therefore, we moved to France. So obviously, I do have French heritage as well through my mother, but it wasn't activated. Let's put it that way. French culture, I think you can only really embed yourself in a culture if you've lived there. And so next thing I know, my French is activated because I'm living there, and I'm going to French school, and it's all of that kicks in. And my little sister was actually born in the south of France, whilst we were moving, because every summer we would go to the south of France, even if we didn't have a house there because of our family lineage, my mother's. So all of a sudden, the French culture became very, very important to us. And that was also a lovely period of my life. And I went to boarding school in Reims, and then I graduated, and then I started going to Paris. And Paris was the beginning of where I would say my life's journey started to change. It was at that moment where I started to realize that the world is not what I thought it was, because the world of being brought up by incredible parents, loving, caring, and creative, it was a bubble. It was a bubble. It was a bubble, and that bubble felt safe. And although I carried that bubble with me, I also carried with me the interpretation of the world where, everyone has goodness in them, which is still a wonderful thing that I have. But I took it to an extreme where I trusted more than I doubted people. I never questioned people's intention, because
Hmm.
also, you're very young. You're very young. And what that did to me was that I started acting. And when I was going to acting school in Paris, in the North region of Paris, I met people, different people. And one day, coming back from school, and I still call it school because it is acting school, but I wasn't that young anymore. I was 18. I was intercepted, and a stranger asked me to take me back home, who I knew. I had met a couple of occasions. I didn't know where he lived. I didn't really know who he was, but he was just, and I was like, okay. And I never questioned, like, how did he know where I lived? Do you know what I mean? I just didn't put the two together because I was just very innocent, very innocent. And I think at some point we all carry that innocence, in our lives. And what happened is that when I got in the car, at that point the doors locked, and I realized that I was never going home. And that moment was the first time I'd ever received any physical, I got a punch to my jawline. And that was the first time I was like, oh, okay, something's happening here. And I don't know what it is, but I have to be extra alert. And it was very interesting because the alert phase of this moment triggered an inner voice. I didn't know I had an inner voice. You know what, you've probably heard that before, right? In moments you hear a voice, this, that, and I had these images of my life. I actually had an image of my dad, like at my funeral. I was like, oh God, because obviously you probably noticed through the conversation, I love my father so much. So I was like, oh my God, is this that bad? I was like, and nothing had happened yet to me other than a physical, punch. But my mind and my whole body was filled with an instinct that I had never felt before. And the instinct was definitely fear, and it was definitely flight. How do I get out of this? Because I know part of me is going to die. I don't know to what extent yet, but part of me is going to die. And a voice occurred, and the voice said, do exactly like him. And I'm like, what is this? What does this mean? And as I turned my face looking to the driver's seat, I could see his profile, and I could see twitching. Like he was just physically twitching. And I was like, wow, what is that? I mean, I remember I wasn't really brought up watching films. My father didn't, we weren't, I mean, although I was studying acting by then, I was still reading the classics, Shakespeare. I was more of I was not a film consumer per se. And we definitely, any news about murders or this is that, for me, it was like, that's on the news. That's not something that can happen to me. That's what we think when we're young. We think we're invincible. We don't look at the dangers because we don't think they exist until it becomes personal, right? And this was the personalization of this experience of the world in a moment. And so what ensued after that was that I was taken, and I was physically and sexually abused. I'm not going to go into the detail because it means something, but the details of this story won't go to the messaging that I'm trying to say here. But let's say it happened multiple times. And because of that message that I got, that voice, do exactly like him, I started to shiver and tremor like him. And what that did was that triggered, I don't know how, some form of empathy or mirroring with this individual, with this man. And he was like, you're sick. You need help. Okay, I need to get you to see a doctor. And it was this kind of psychotic frenzy that started for him to see. I don't know how, but I broke through this ice. And that's when he took me back to Paris, because he took me outside of Paris. And that's when I was able to escape. And I left Paris in an hour, and I was taken to my parents' house, and at that point I was taken to doctors overseas, and the rest is history. But that was a moment that changed my life, because it was the breaking of innocence. It was a moment where I was like, wow, this is real. I mean, wow, there are people who do not have the best intention out there. And what does that mean? And what does that mean? So that's, and I attach I was talking about my childhood and why I traveled, but I attach that to that event to France because after that, I traveled nonstop. I was on a mission to heal. And it meant by not being in the same geolocation. Because being in the same geolocation for me was a distinction I needed to create to understand that pain is not just a physical and geo-localized experience. Pain actually carries you through wherever you are at, and you cannot escape it. But that was for me to understand.
Wow, Gabriella, you have so much courage to share that story, and the detail orientation, the imagery that you create in your unique ways of describing that traumatic event. They're very eyebrow raising. I couldn't help but just take it in and observe and place myself as a bird observing the situation. I can't help but wonder, what was the process for you not allowing yourself to be stuck in that moment? And how did you, obviously you started traveling.
Yes.
How did you learn to develop the courage to speak about it? What was the beginning of the healing journey for you? Was there some sort of psychological disruption that you're like, I'm going to make a conscious decision to share, explore, heal in unique ways so that this particular experience doesn't happen to others?
So, yes. So this is what happened after, and I think this will allow me to answer your question. But I will say one thing. Sharing for me was not an option in the beginning. See, sharing was not possible. And I still believe today, till today, that unless you've transcended the story of a traumatic event, it is very hard to share because sometimes oversharing a story or an event can cause more harm to your psyche or to the people around you. So it's with great responsibility that one has to use the tool of sharing, and sharing has to come with loving, tender care, literally, like loving, tender care. So, and why am I saying loving, tender care? Because loving, tender care allowed me to heal. And that was through ultimate strangers that I met on this journey. So when I went to England to meet my family, doctors, etc., my uncle, I was crying, of course, every night. Of course, I want people to hear this because this is PTSD, but I didn't know I had it, right? I couldn't sleep, disrupted sleep. I wanted to always close the windows and close the shutters. In France, there's shutters. So it's, it's like a curtain outside. So I would always need to feel that. I slept between my parents. I mean, that is weird. Meaning I slept physically in between my mother and my father. I mean, even speaking about it is very like how, anyway, they accepted it. The only thing that was a problem for me was that I wasn't ready to share with them. They knew that, drama, this, that, and there was other things that I had to deal with, police, etc. But it was too much, too soon. And so I realized that if I looked at their faces every single time, I would see my pain on their face. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to see my pain on their faces. I didn't want to see it on my little sisters. I didn't want to see it on my parents. I didn't want to see it on my uncle. I just didn't want to see my pain because that's the last thing I want to see on other people's faces. So for me, I realized that I had to make a choice. And that choice was I needed to be far away from the people I loved for that moment, just because they didn't have the tools either to support my healing. They had love, but what I needed was different than what they thought. And I didn't, and the truth is, like you say, I didn't know what I needed. But what I did know is that I needed to heal. I made a choice. Because when I saw my uncle, who's a doctor, he said, I think you're going to have to be put on antidepressants, Prozac possibly, so you can at least stop crying. Because I was crying all the time. And I looked at him, and it was a daunting moment. And I said, no. And I said, no, I don't think I need that. And it's not, by the way, I'm not dismissing therapy, SSR. I am not dismissing that. But in my moment, at that time, I said no. And that's when I started to write. I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I journaled. Now we call it journaling. Back in the day, 22 years ago, journaling wasn't a thing. I was just writing because I needed to express myself with a non-judgmental page. This page was not judging me. I was just writing on a blank page. And by the way, I never use lined pages because for me, that's a confinement. So I would be sketching, I'd be like, drawing. And also another thing that I never did, I never spoke about the peoples by their names. I never used their names. I said, this person, who had these qualities helped me. I never used their name because I thought that if someone found my book, my journal, I didn't want to violate anyone's privacy. It's strange, isn't it?
That's such forward thinking around like HIPAA violations and wanting to preserve the integrity of the individual, but even to take it a step further in relation to the word joy, it sounds like your interaction with other people is less about their title and their label and more about the frequency at which you feel when you connect, when you converse, and when you're going through a moment with that person alongside you. And I think there's value in that. It's a feeling.
It is. And what happened was after that, I got to experience incredible people. Just incredible people. Like Bryce, the level of people that I interacted with after, because what happened was, and thank God my family, family are amazing. If we have family, we have to cherish our family because we never know when the superhero kicks in, the superhero qualities of our family members. Even if I couldn't be with my immediate family, what happened is that my grandfather had a house in New Zealand. And when I looked at the map, meaning I want to go on the other side of the planet, literally, it was New Zealand. And my mother was like, well, grandfather has a house there, grand-père. Let's see if he can take you in. And they took me in. They weren't always at the house, which was great because I needed my privacy. But it was a big house and I did have my privacy. And when I landed there, I literally landed there hoping, my hope was like, oh, I'm going to feel so much better when I get off this plane. And yet I get off the plane and I feel like shit. I'm like, shit. Okay. Tick. Geolocalization of pain is not relevant to this search.
Quick learning lesson right off the bat.
Okay. I was like, okay, well, can't escape this time. I mean, the guy's not here, but but I'm stuck with this shit. And I want to know where this is because this mind trash is, excuse my language, fucking polluting me. And I want to be the little girl who I was before, which was and I remember, what I was crying about so much? I was crying. I was like, please, I don't want to lose my innocence. I just want to be that girl who was dancing under the rain, walking barefoot there, trusting individuals and, laughing with them and inside, I just wanted to be that person again. I didn't blame who I was. I didn't blame that. I was lucky because a lot of women today who are raped have this thing where they blame themselves. That's not true. Get that out of your mind. It is absolutely not true. There's nothing that you did that, enticed rape. there is just urges, situations that occur, circumstance. Of course, I'm not asking you to put yourself in danger. One has to have a little bit of common sense. But other than that, it is, from a psychological perspective, it is never your fault, And I was lucky. I realized that it was not my fault because I was still yearning for that person who I was at that moment before it happened. So I still like that. That person, despite all of her flaws and her believing in like beautiful strangers, was still a better person than the person crying every day and who couldn't sleep and who was like trapped in a moment and that cage of the mind. And so I said, no way, I'm getting out of this. And because when you say no way, I'm getting out of this, even as an intention in your mind, the universe responds beautifully. And a local gazette, a local newspaper came through the door and it said, free your mind. I was like, oh my God, I need to free this mind. Body, I was like, I get it. I don't have any physical injury anymore, but I understand what this is. This is a body. And spirit, I said, I have absolutely no clue what the spirit thing is, but I'm going to call this number. And I call a number, and it was a Chinese woman with a Chinese accent on the other line. And she said, no, you can come. It's, can come to the Central Park. You can come. And I said, I'm a student. I have no money. She said, no, it's free. You can come. So I went, and it was kind of the first time I was really leaving the house by myself. So of course you can imagine, and I didn't have a mobile phone. I didn't want one. So it was very, back in the day, there were those heavy Nokia blocks, like I'm older than you.
No, I had one of those things, the Nokia brick thing.
Yeah, the brick thing that like you can, throw out the window and break one.
Yep.
So anyway, I didn't want a brick, and I walked to the Central Park area, and it was an open air shopping mall, and under this, in this open air shopping mall, there's a patch of grass, and this man, and a tree, and under this tree is a man wearing these white, almost like what I'm wearing now, like a white kind of kimono with white pants. Smiling and just being him, and then this Chinese woman with this cassette player with this very strange music coming out of it, and I was like, okay, this is a joke. Like, what is this? There's like some hidden cameras here. This is like really phony. Okay, this is beyond phony. Like, I can't, Anyway, I still went up to her. I was like, I called. She's like, yeah, you called. Yeah, just please, this is the teacher. And I was like, teacher? I'm like, what is this? And anyway, he didn't speak English. I still do not speak Chinese. And for some reason, I just give it a chance. Just give it a little bit of you. And because we were in a public place, I felt safe because, there's a mall. So there's people running around. It's not like we're silent on top of a mountain, it's not that beautiful. Okay. It's a shopping mall with shops and a lot of dissonant sounds, it wasn't that, amazing. So anyway, I sat down and he did an amazing thing. He looked at me and he put his hand on the patch of grass next to him and he just went like this. And I could understand it meant sit. And so I started to sit. And because we didn't really understand each other, he just took my hands and started to put this one on this. And then he like, close your eyes. And what I didn't know was that I was meditating. But he never said that. And I had never had that education. Now you see meditation like it's like spiritual chewing gum everywhere, right? But at that time, 22 years ago, what was that, And who is this Asian person, quote unquote, looking like as if he's in an action movie, from Hong Kong, teaching me this stuff? There's a lot of bias because we don't know what things are. And so here I am, closing my eyes and trusting a stranger again. And I was like, wow. And I was like this, I was opening my eyes and I was, But it was a beautiful moment that when I sank into it, that moment became timeless. And next thing I know, 2 hours had gone by and it stopped. And I was like, oh. And so I went back every day for 3 months with this man who I probably knew his name at the time, but as I told you, I purposely did not hold on to the names for my healing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember his name and I never wrote it anywhere. But he was an exceptional teacher who only taught by his presence of being. He never once heard my story. It didn't even matter to him.
I bet he
Because
could feel it though.
yeah, exactly. But what he did was such a selfless act of presence of being. And, New Zealand's not a sunny place, windy, rainy. So I would even go in the rain. I would go in the wind. I would just go because after a few sessions, I was sleeping better at night. I had gap between my thoughts. And all of a sudden, I started to remember who I was. And I was starting to smile. I was starting to laugh. And that was the beginning, Bryce, of this person of who I am before. And I started writing something called I Look Back with a Wiser Innocence, because that's who I am now. I'm not, I'm still a child because we're all children, of this beautiful universe and planet. But I'm able to layer wisdom within my innocence. And this was thanks to that beginning of that journey. And the rest is history. I've been teaching meditation now. I've taught in prisons. I've taught women who have been victim of sexual violence in many different countries. I continue to do advocacy for women and young girls, and also young men. There's a lot of things that we must do in that perspective, and so for me, my spiritual journey, my second life, started with this event that then created a deeper understanding of why we do what we do, why hurt people, the power of forgiveness. I had to forgive this guy from a spiritual mind perspective, because I realized that I had so much anger. The anger was daunting my mind. I was absolutely overwhelmed by a tsunami of anger. And I was writing, I'm like, you know what? I'm gone. This is done. I do not need this person in my existence. Even in my mind, it's a waste of space. And that doesn't mean I'm denying it. That means just I'm releasing that hold on me. And I've made a choice. So, there's choices that need to happen for you to lead a life of freedom from suffering. And choices need to be made by distinctions. They help, right? And obviously I was very lucky because I had a childhood that was very anchored in my being, that was related to joy, wonder, curiosity, compassion, science and art, and expression. I was very lucky because I had that as a basis. But I could have gone the other way. I realized that's when I realized after this traumatic event that I could have easily gone on drugs, easily become an addict, easily, went through my 20s like this as a model floating through Paris and like whatever, don't giving a, F about anything. Because that could have been another life, because that could have been another choice. You see? So I was very aware at the crossroad of existence and the crossroad of choices that you have. And even if the voice is faint, you do have a choice. You do have a little choice, even in the midst of pain. And you just have to allow that voice you have to turn the volume up on the voice.
Mm-hmm. There's so many gentle nuggets that you share in your such passionate storytelling. And I'm just, I'm just in awe over here. I can't help but lean in though. When I connected with your colleague, Punacha Masaya,
Yes.
He said something to me that I like to remind people of occasionally, and that is, we're human beings, we're not human doings. And I think through this process, it's easy to deflect, it's easy to distract, to lean on external substances or actions just to do, and bury certain traumatic events. I'd like to take a moment to thank our friends over at Vuori. They are bringing a new perspective on performance apparel. Their products are incredibly versatile and allow for freedom and flexibility in any arena. As humans, we are complex creatures, always on the move and always on the go. Allow Vuori to join you as you navigate the complexities of the human experience. Whether you are training, adventuring, lounging, traveling, or attending meetings, Vuori has options to suit your active lifestyle. My personal favorites are the men's core short and their line of Ponto performance products, which are so incredibly soft. Check these guys out over at vuori.com/Invictus Mindset for 20% off your very first purchase and free shipping. That's VUORI.com/Invictus Mindset for 20% off your very first purchase and free shipping. Everything they have is designed to work out in, but doesn't look or feel like it. It's so freaking comfortable that you won't want to wear anything else. Breathing, movement, circulation, digestion. What do all these body functions have in common? Our muscles. There are over 600 muscles in the human body that are responsible for supporting our daily activities. That's why your muscle health is incredibly important. On this podcast, I always discuss seeking our peak expression and striving to maximize our human potential. And so I try to share with you the top products that I find on the market. My H&B is a clinically proven ingredient that has been shown to help build and maintain lean muscle mass, increase strength, improve recovery, and enhance body composition. Learn more about your muscle health at myhmb.com/Invictus. Once again, that's myhmb.com/Invictus. Enhance your muscle health and enhance your life. But there's unique power in stillness. Absolutely. And sometimes I like the analogy, if you're fighting with your thoughts, it's almost like jumping into a pool where there's bubbles and chaos and splashing everywhere. But sometimes in the midst of just calm stillness, all of a sudden those bubbles and everything dissipates and you gain clarity. And I feel like that's what you got a little bit on that patch of grass, where it wasn't an avalanche of, Gabriella, you need to do this, you need to do that. It was just be here now. Allow yourself to sit in your own journey so far, take what you need, and then let go of the rest. And that doesn't mean you deny it. You acknowledge the existence of some of these challenges that you faced, but you also have the choice to not hold on to them, to not put them in your pocket, to not allow them to serve as a cape or a backpack, just to know that they played a role at one time. And now they get to float into the abyss. And you get to move on as a lighter, freer form of yourself. And I think that word free is very powerful for you, because you had that freedom as a child to wonder and be curious and play with your imagination. And that's enabled you now to develop tools in your toolbox to motivate, inspire, and create resources with other human beings and operate at a very, very magical frequency, which I can feel through the screen today, which I felt the first time I met you, and you can feel throughout your wondrous humanitarian journey that you're so amazing at sharing and creating a safe space for others to connect and collaborate and relate. It's not like you position yourself like, I'm out of reach, I'm way up here, you're way down here. It's like, no, I'm actually co-piloting next to you. And we're going to navigate this messy thing called life together. And that's my humble attempt at kind of summarizing some of the things that we were thankful to listen to here just a minute ago.
Summary. It's a good summary. Thank you for those reflections.
It's very, very cool. So as you navigated this, how did you transition to, these humanitarian approaches and being such an explorer of the world to think, okay, I want to carve my own path in the mountain of life and lean into this entrepreneurial space and connect with people from all walks of life to develop tools for them to use for enhancing their mental health and never feeling alone?
So I think what's really important to underline is that when you're going through an inner crisis and a changing moment in your life, I remember when, this first event happened, the one I previously shared, is that I remember, hold on, if this is happening to me and I'm in a Western country, quote unquote, with systems, quote unquote, they're supposed to be supporting women and helping them, then what is it like for women who I know don't have a voice? Women in India, Nepal, Burma, I'm not saying all women don't have a voice there, but some poorest regions, some do not have a voice. And I remember thinking that immediately because I had that social awareness thanks to my education, because my grandfather also worked for UNESCO for the development of education and science in Africa. So I had that knowledge. So when that happened to me, my almost other immediate question was like, but what about these other women? Like, how do they navigate this? Because it's so painful. How do they do it without having a safe space? And so that question led, I would say, the answer in development that unraveled in my life. Meaning everything that I was doing from that point onwards was to serve other women or other girls or other, people. And so what happened is I didn't know I was becoming a humanitarian. What happened is that I was just being open to possibilities of helping places that I was visiting. So it wasn't like I had a mission, oh, I'm going there, I'm going to do this. I'm like, oh, I'm here. What can I do? What can I do? And I think that was, for me, it was a very, this was co-created with the world. My life is co-created with the people I've been with, I've learned from. I learn more than people think I do. Meaning, I don't have all the answers. I don't. But what I do is that I do listen. I have a listening, and sometimes, we're not perfect. We're not perfect. The teacher is not perfect, but we share space. And we share those imperfections together. And we share those stories that, can be transcended in a safe place. We can share space and meditation. And I realized that meditation was the root for me, for everything that I did. Not only do I have a personal practice that's very acute, and I went on my whole 20s, I went on very long spiritual retreats. I went to find Tibetan masters who are still my teachers today. I traveled to India in ashrams, South India. I'm going to an ashram for my own mental, hygiene in December. This is very, very active in my life. So wherever I am, I either teach, I hang out with community leaders, I help them finish a project or we start a project together. But it's always grassroots. It's never blah, 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 and then we're not even doing it. It's more like, oh, we're together. What can we do? It's different. You don't come in with an idea and then you start changing people's lives, because that idea is always wrong. Because an idea comes from the mind, whereas presence of being comes from the heart. So it's like you have to be with people. And that's why politics are failing today. They have ideas. They're not being with people. that's just failing. It's a failing system. It's not based on the human expression of presence.
I also think you come in asking really good questions because you listen, you pay attention, and you observe. And then as a byproduct, the question becomes, how can I help and how can I serve? What problems can we solve together? Versus what can I get? And I think sometimes there's a unique dichotomy there where, you know, people are seeking to gain rather than to make a difference. And there was also key phrasing there of, hey, how can we do this together? Because then credit is shared and there's no cognitive bias. It's now a collaboration and a collective, which allows for so many unique integrations and different thought processes and perspectives to kind of combine into this beautiful smoothie rather than just it being one ingredient, you know?
No, but it's true. And, you know, life is a journey. That is something, that's why I say that I'm a human explorer. Not because, you know, it's a fashionable term. No, because I'm exploring, you know, being human. It's like, it's very clear. It's like, we don't know who we are until probably the last moments of our life. So let's just explore who we are now, you know?
I love that. As we wrap things up, Gabriella, I can't help but wonder, where did the Never Alone global movement kind of come to be? That is something you've been incredibly passionate about. I've seen you and Deepak putting out different media campaigns to help motivate, inspire, and provide resources for people along the way. How did this collective kind of come together?
So this is another personal story. And, you know, I'm starting to say, I've realized that I'm starting to say the two events that changed my life. And you heard the first event, which was, you know, led me to who I am today. And the second event was I spoke so dearly about my little sister. And we had three sisters, but now in this physical plane, we're only two. And we lost our little sister to suicide 4 years ago. And, you know, at that point, when this happened, first of all, we couldn't believe it. We just couldn't. You know, none of us realized that that would be the end. You know, she had experienced mental distress prior, but we had all been there to rally and support her, and she had come through. And so we thought that was something from the past. And this literally happened in a 48-hour, I would say, descent into a place where we were unable to be with her, and having taken her own life, we were all not in the same country. We were not there. But when this happened, we were. It felt like a collective suicide. It felt like the whole family had gone, and it's hard because, you know, I think there's a distinction to make, because me coming from my background now of like meditating and doing humanitarian work, I was like, what did I not see here? What was I unable to bridge? Like, I thought, you know, and then all of a sudden I realized that mental health was a distinction that I actually had not considered, because for me, spiritual health was mental health. I didn't make it separate. But then I realized that the separation at times is needed. And I didn't know that. And then from my mother's perspective, losing her favorite daughter, my father losing like the youngest, like my sister being close to her in age because of the 3.5-year difference, she felt guilty, you know, and everyone had a story related to my sister's passing. And the story was so tremendous. It felt like, you know, the Titanic was sinking and nobody was going to survive. And at that point, I made a choice again. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take time off work as an actor. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to be with my family, even if sometimes I just wanted to run away, because it's horrible to watch people disintegrate. It's really, really hard to do. Not that I wasn't disintegrating, but because of my toolbox, like you just said, I was able to navigate with grief. And I was able to be very action orientated because of the tools that I had. So the speeches at the funeral, the cremation, I took everything into action because my parents could not do it. Nor could my sister, nor could my other family. We were all there to support, but there was certain things that needed very practical thinking, and nobody could be practical in that moment. And by the way, I'm the far from practical, but in this moment I needed to be. And I was able to be because of my distinction through meditation and through practice and through the journey that I was on already. And that, led me to thinking that, I started to do all this research and realizing that every 40 seconds someone dies by suicide, that it's not just, a personal thing, that actually mental health experts, there are not enough of. There's a lack of resources. There's a lack of access to resources. Oh my God, it's a huge taboo. I mean, we had the press who were there on site at my sister's passing before the family arrived. I mean, how sick and disgusting is that? It's like, what are you guys, like scavengers? Like, you're like, who are you? And I'm not saying this from an anger perspective. I'm just saying, like, look at what we do. Humans just thrive off sensational storytelling that is sold for 2 cents on newspapers, or in crappy blogs, or, like, oh la la, so-and-so took their life. Da, da, da. What is that? Where is the empathy in that storytelling? Zero empathy. And yet, you amplify this kind of darkness around mental health without giving a platform and a solution. And I was like, you know what? No, that is not going to happen, because I'm not going to allow this to happen. So, me being me, and I was like, that's just not going to happen. I know there's going to be a way. We're going to create things. She was a musician, a singer-songwriter. Her art was absolutely exquisite, and I'm not just being biased because I'm her sister. Her lyrics were full of her inner turmoil, but we thought it was art. We didn't connect it to a real mental trauma, and that's our fault. And I'm not saying this for my family. I'm just saying for myself. Being an artist, we revel in this embellishment of art. Oh wow, that film was so, it moved me. But do we look at the price it takes for artists to go through that? And do we support them with a little bit more of empathy instead of criticizing every 5 minutes what people do? Do you know what I mean? So I was like, I was looking at my world very differently. And I realized that as mental health is a universal problem, it's an individualized personal concept. And because of our backgrounds, our religions, how we're brought up, our education, where we live, do we have access? Do we not? I mean, in India, there's only something like 6,000 therapists for like 1 billion people. I mean, hello. Do you know what I mean?
The ratio's way off.
The ratios are like, in the US, we only just started this 988 national, federal campaign thanks to the pandemic, because the pandemic woke everyone up. And the common denominator is that everyone has mental health problems. Mm-hmm. Well, that's true, actually. So how can we reverse this, right? How can we reverse this equation? So I was working on a film. I decided to use the medium that I know best, which is storytelling. And I was working on a film with the director, Michel Pascal. And the film was following a woman who lost her son to suicide, and I was playing her. And his suggestion was, well, let's interview experts. And one of the psychiatrists he worked with also worked with Dr. Deepak Chopra. So we interviewed Dr. Deepak, and he, at the end of the interview, I said, do you know that every 40 seconds someone dies by suicide? He's like, what is that? I was like, yes, these numbers are real. And this was prior to pandemic, of course. And he said, oh, can we have a further conversation? I was like, absolutely. Absolutely, we need to have this conversation. And we did. And he introduced me to his team leaders, Punacha as well. And we were able to aggregate an idea. And the idea was never alone. How can people never be alone? How can they experience their oneness? How can they experience the whole world in themselves? So that they don't have to take their lives. But also, how can they feel connected to the right resources? How can they feel part of a community that will enhance their overall well-being so that they can be leaders in the world and ultimately heal? We never use the word heal. It's very biased, that word, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, we need healers today. And so without going into spiritual healing, just the fact of healing, we need to create a platform for healing. So Never Alone, the idea was born. And when the pandemic hit, we realized that there was a lot to do. And it accelerated our quote unquote roadmap, if you can call it as such. And we deployed technology. My little sister's name was Paulette, but her nickname was Pee-wee, which is also an acronym for people interacting with intention. So we co-created an AI emotional chatbot called Pee-wee, where you're able to access her for free 24/7, and by text messaging, Facebook Messenger, open browser, and web browser, and you're able to create relationship with this bot, but also get resiliency tools, mental hygiene tools. If you're in a crisis, you're able to connect with a therapist. And so we offered this during the pandemic, and now we're revamping Pee-wee so that its overall well-being, less targeted at suicide intervention, but more into how can we create your overall mental well-being to support you to lead the life that you live. And if you need access to a therapist, you can. Here it is. And we're doing it from a consciousness perspective because we're working with Dr. Deepak Chopra. It allows us to have the wealth of his knowledge at our hands to support people at different levels of awareness, from a spiritual consciousness perspective, bringing that into mental health, bringing that into mental well-being, looking and valorizing the work of mental health experts. There's the cutting edge of psychedelics and mental health, the cutting edge of psychiatry and nutrition, the cutting edge of anxiety and what is the we work with these incredible experts who are leading scientists and in different realms in different universities across the US. And they are all part of the Never Alone Alliance. And our goal is to create this platform so everyone can find what they need, so that they can have the distinction of, okay, I have my mental hygiene, I have this mental space that I'm now empowered to take care of, And by doing that, if I really, really need an expert and it's not going away, I can find this expert and I can go this way. And for us, it's a way to not only democratize access to mental well-being, but it's a way to support them with technology. Technology is a big part of what we do, but also where people can find like-minded minds to support their journey on the path to joy, from freedom from suffering. So,
Man, that is so beautiful. And I also can't help but note that it's decreasing the barrier to entry because our world is so full of judgment when it comes to mental health. And I think it gives people the opportunity to seek to understand, not just themselves, but others. And then through the process of talk therapy that, doesn't need to be within the public eye, but can be in a very private residence, gives people the access to realize, oh, wow, I do have people that can support me even though I'm in the muck of it right now. And then from there, it can help change their trajectory and truly give them light at the end of the tunnel. So that way they realize that they do have hope and they do have people that can help them in the midst of extreme challenge or psychological warfare. And I cannot help but just feel very connected to that. I love the concept of Pee-wee. I think that's really cool. I love how it has a very personal connection with you. People
Yes.
interacting with
With
what?
intention.
With intention. I love that. I absolutely love that. Gabriella, you are doing some magical things in the world. As we wrap things up today, I really want to pick your brain on one thing that stood out to me on another conversation that I heard you discuss. And that is, what are the 4 A's?
Oh, I love the 4 A's. It's my favorite. Okay, the 4 A's is actually a tool that we use for Never Alone and at the foundation called Love in Action. So remember, I mentioned earlier on in our sharing, is that you have to be in action by your presence, right? So how do we evoke? How do we bring presence into action? How do we bring love in action? And so we use the 4 A's that triggers that. So the first one is attention. Let me bring my attention to this person or event in my life that I need to take care of because it's dragging out, for example, or to myself because I need to be more loving to myself. So you bring attention. Then what happens after attention? You start to find ways of appreciating you through deep, deep observation and the other. It could be a physical trait. It could be, wow, my eyebrows look great today. Like I'm just, for yourself, right? Makes me feel good, Or, for someone else, wow, I never noticed the light that is coming on her face as we're having this conversation. Wow, I can see her tenderness. And she might have been someone who was very relentlessly angry, for example. Mm-hmm. But all of a sudden you're going differently or if it's a situation in your life, you're like, you know what, how can I appreciate this if I look back a little bit? Let me observe this situation from a different bird's eye perspective, right? So I'm giving you a couple of examples. Then what happens after appreciation? Automatically, affection comes out. Oh my God, I didn't even know I like this person. Now I love her. I see where she's coming from. Oh, how can I show my affection? I might just want to hug her. Or I might just want to say, you know what, you look really good today. And that person, that little thing is going to change that person's moment. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or you're going to smile and that person's going to be like, why are you smiling? I was like, I just, it's a virtual expression of love, right? So affection for yourself, it could be, you know what, I'm going to give myself a little I'm going to put my hand on my heart. I'm just going to, that is my way of, expressing my affection to myself. To a situation, it would be, let me learn how can I look at this? I've looked at it this differently. How can I, wrap this in tenderness? Because when we look at a situation, often we judge. Let me fill that judgment with affection so that it distills the separation, right? So you bring that distilling of separation, which is, let me actually love this in a different way, And you could also write it on a piece of paper and put the paper next to flowers. I mean, you can be so creative with this. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. It's a creative freedom. And so we've gone through attention, appreciation, affection. Now we're going through it to the last one, which I love, which is acceptance. We have to accept what is. And sometimes people can't be the idea of what we think they are. Sometimes we just have to allow people to be and accept that they have certain limitations that are happening right now. But that doesn't mean they're like that for the rest of their life. But right now, let's accept who they are because they're beautiful. They have an inner child, and we might disagree to agree, but I can see and I've accepted that person, And when you look at a situation, climate change, okay, let me just accept this for now because my anxiety, nobody's going to help me with that. Nobody's going to help me with that. So let me just, yes, okay, I've accepted that. When you accept things, you start breathing differently. Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden your body is responding different to the state of acceptance can also be seen as a state of surrendering, And when you accept certain, you're like, you know what, I've accepted that I put on 10 kilos. It is what it is. I can't fit into my pants. It means I do have to go and buy more pants. But you know what? It's a new phase of my life. I accept this, And so, do you know what I mean? It's a very, and we call it the four A's. Of course, Deepak and Punacha would resume this very succinctly. But I like giving examples because I want you to be able to play with this.
Yeah.
You can apply this to absolutely anything and go and have fun with it. And what we hope to create is love in action ambassadors who are able to almost teach these little communities so that you can share and exercise within one another around the four A's and meditate together, but share mental hygiene tools, create the mental space of the four A's so that you can learn how to change your life and be empowered to be leaders. Ultimately, we need more kind leaders.
There you have it, guys. Miss Gabriella Wright, layering wisdom on top of her inner child. I absolutely loved our conversation today. Thank you so much for spending time with me and sharing so much deep vulnerability and little nuggets for people to apply to their life today.
Of course. Well, I really enjoyed. Thank you for creating that safe space. It's very important for everyone. And I appreciate you. You look great. And I can't wait to see that Banksy hanging on the wall.
I know. I can't wait to hang it up either. I'm excited. It just arrived a few hours ago. And I mean, when you look at that, so much of our conversation relates to that, right? Like, maintain a childlike curiosity. We never really grow up. We just learn how to act in public sometimes.
Yes.
The concept of seeking to understand and, peeling back the layers and peeking behind the curtain to really understand, like, okay, this is what we're seeing to the human eye, but maybe there's more there. And unless we create that safe space and that uniqueness and that vulnerability, sometimes we're left in a world of unknown. And then, on the other side of that is mental health challenge and things that we can't necessarily, blame any particular person, but by asking better questions, being more curious, and really, truly, and authentically connecting with the world, I think we can really create love in action, which is very similar to what you guys are trying to do over there at the Chopra Foundation. So, Gabriella, you are a Disney-like energy and frequency to the world. Thank you for providing us with your beautiful light today. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram, although I'm always behind on posting just because I do a lot, but you can find me there, Lady G Wright. You can also find neveralone.love on Instagram, our website, neveralone.love, the same thing. You can also follow the Chopra Foundation on Instagram and on the website. But we're very active and we do have community events. So just always make sure that, we might be local someday in your area. So just follow us and we'll respond in the best way possible.
And spend some time with Pee-wee. Magical technology that can help all of us in our journey.
You can access her on our website and sign up, and it's very easy. And there's no violation of privacy, which is important.
Yeah, that's very important. Yeah. Gabriella, you're amazing. You're wonderful.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you, and I look forward to crossing paths with you soon.
Me too.
For those of you listening or observing on YouTube, if you enjoyed my conversation with Gabriella Wright, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Until next time. Are you over 35 and in need of a solid training program? Are you looking to improve your athleticism and keep up with the younger athletes in your CrossFit gym? Then look no further than our Invictus Masters program. This program places year-round emphasis on mobility and stability exercises with movements that we have seen directly benefit our Masters athletes. Our program is led by Nicole DeHart and offers a training program designed specifically for Masters athletes who are looking to compete at a higher level in the sport of CrossFit. Some of our top Masters athletes in the world train with us, including CrossFit Games champion Kevin Kester, Matt Beals, and Pat Sprague. You can learn more about their stories and the Invictus Masters program by checking out their episodes right here on the Invictus Mindset Podcast. If you'd like more information about the current training cycle or to join the Invictus Masters program, please email Nicole at invictusathlete.com. That's NICHOLE at invictusathlete.com. myhmb.com. Breathing, movement, circulation, digestion. What do all these body functions have in common? Our muscles. There are over 600 muscles in the human body that are responsible for supporting our daily activities. That's why your muscle health is incredibly important. On this podcast, I always discuss seeking our peak expression and striving to maximize our human potential. And so I try to share with you the top products that I find on the market. MyHMB is a clinically proven ingredient that has been shown to help build and maintain lean muscle mass, increase strength, improve recovery, and enhance body composition. Learn more about your muscle health at myhmb.com/Invictus. Once again, that's myhmb.com/Invictus. Enhance your muscle health and enhance your life.